Hi, I'm Chris Anderson, host of Future Frequency.
And I'm Damion Taylor, co host of Future Frequency, a podcast where we talk about the marriage of tech and content and what are the impacts for our future.
We have an awesome first guest today. It's Patrick Caligiuri, otherwise known as Producer Patrick. I got your name right. I'm very stoked about that. Had to work on it a few times.
The first step. First step in the right direction. All right.
Right direction. And Patrick, for those who don't know you, aka Producer Patrick, could you let folks know what you do and what you're working on?
Sir, I'm a television producer of 20 years. I've worked on a lot of reality or unscripted series you may have heard of, like The Amazing Race or Big Brother, Naked and Afraid, and American Idol. Been in the industry for a couple decades now, but as the industry has changed over the last year, and we've seen it with COVID, we've seen it with strikes, we've seen it with the slowdown of production, I sort of pivoted to an online media analyst, helping production workers, helping people who are involved with the industry sort of understand the massive technological changes that's happening to the industry.
Yeah, that's a big one. And I saw one of your topics recently on LinkedIn, which you have a great presence on LinkedIn as well as TikTok. I think you're up to like 224,000 or something on TikTok.
I got a few for being in a freelance industry and not being a CEO or some type of corporate overlord. Like, I think I'm doing pretty good on LinkedIn. But about 25,000 followers on LinkedIn right now. Yes.
Nice. The power of content, man. So let's dig in. One of the topics I saw on LinkedIn pop into my feed that you were talking about is, will cable TV die? Go.
Well, it's so funny because literally as I was coming onto this, the S&P just labeled Warner Brothers Discovery as junk status. They just downgraded their credit rating because Warner Brothers Discovery has about $38 billion in debt. A little bit better than how they did at the end of last year, where they were $41 billion in debt. But basically, they have a 4.3 debt ratio, which means that they're earning 4.3 the amount of debt as they are taking in. So Warner Brothers Discovery, and you have to understand, they are merged with Discovery Network. So we're talking the Discovery Channel, we're talking TLC, we're talking the Food Network, all these sort of legacy networks. While Discovery brought them on and merged with them, all of a sudden became obsolete. So they had this giant merger in 2021, 2022, where they brought all these Discovery networks on. If most people don't know, David Zaslav was actually the CEO of Discovery before he took the helm at Warner Brothers. So he started off in the cable world, brought sort of, his baggage over to Warner Brothers, and then merged these companies. And then all of a sudden they became worthless. Why? Because the industry is changing, and it is going through a technological change that media has done throughout the 20th century. We just haven't seen it really in the last 40 years. The last time we saw sort of a major change to our industry was when cable showed up on the scene, and that was in the early 80s. I was still in diapers at the time. So to show how long we've had sort of a status quo of film and television, it's been nearly 40 years. But as we've seen in the 20th century, we saw films go from silent films to talking films, from black and white to color. We saw radio get decimated by television. We saw television somewhat decimate the film industry. And now basically we're in this sort of TV and film moves to the internet. And you already know the audience is starting to be saturated. There's so many media outlets. 170 million Americans are on TikTok alone. That's half the nation. So we're seeing more of this sort of, I guess, migration to social media, and people are just not watching traditional linear television like they used to. Channel surfing is dead. Nobody goes on their TV and flips through their remote anymore to see what's on anymore. Everything is a la carte. The phone has become the new channel surfing. People would rather scroll and waste their time on Instagram Reels or TikTok or YouTube than actually go on television. So television has really become appointment viewing, which is I know that The Last of Us is going to drop sometime on Sunday night, and I'll probably watch it Sunday night when I'm in bed and I'm comfortable and I'm in ready to have an immersive experience. But outside of that, to get people to sort of watch the traditional form of TV, especially with the younger generations, it's just not happening. And it's sort of a natural cycle that's finally caught up with us.
One of the things I really loved about your article was talking about that transition.
Mhm.
And in my background, I worked for Warner Brothers, I worked for NBC Universal, for all of them. And
Mhm.
one of the things that I always focus on is my focus is the audience. Are you paying attention to what the audience wants? And you mentioned social media, of course, being one of the things that is vying for people's attention and winning that game. But I think the other thing that traditional cable and just media in general has ignored is there's also this sense of control that the audience enjoys that they're still trying not to let go. Yeah, you can
Right.
stream it for free, but you can't fast forward unless you see our commercial, right? Or you can watch it, but you can't watch it unless we say it's, for this 48 hours. And so
Yeah.
there's that other element, I feel like, of control where the audience realizes now they have control and they can take that control. And we're seeing cable networks not wanting to give it up, thinking that they still can somehow force people into their appointment viewing or only viewing when they say they can.
100%. And it's a perfect storm. And that's actually, I think, one of the many factors that's actually playing into this. Second factor is, what are the film and television networks? What are they putting out? They're putting out content that's mostly regurgitated IP. But the audience is craving something a little bit more organic. They want to see something new, and this is where tech is kind of trying to figure out what the audience wants through algorithms and through their AI. But sometimes it's something that just comes on the scene out of left field that makes the audience go, wow. And a perfect example I like to use is Ghostbusters. Nobody knew they wanted Ghostbusters until they saw Ghostbusters. No one was sitting around in 1984 being like, man, you know what we need? There needs to be a group of guys with ion laser packs that make a ruckus and shoot zap ghosts. Nobody thought of that, and it showed up and everybody went, this is amazing and I love it. And there's nothing like that now. The other thing that the networks tend to have dropped the ball on is, again, making a connection to the younger generations. It's almost like they are trying to project to millennials, and they've grown up with millennials and Gen X and boomers, but they decided they wanted to forget Gen Z and Gen Alpha below. If you look at media, there's no John Hughes for Gen Z. There's no Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. There's no Saved by the Bell. There's nothing that really talks to teen angst and like the movies that we grew up with. And we're like, yes, finally somebody understands me or what I'm going through. So where did that younger generation go? They didn't go to TV and film to watch it with mom and dad. They went to influencers. They went to their peers, and that's what they see. And that is literally the biggest mistake that I think that traditional television and networks did, was they forgot the younger generation and they did nothing to appeal to that generation. And now that generation is moving on. That generation is also used to free material. They do everything on YouTube. They see everything on Instagram or Snapchat. So the idea that these streamers that are now charging almost $20 a month are going to go to this younger generation and say, hey, are you going to cough up $20 for this quality programming? Every Gen Zer is going to look up from their phone and be like, no, dude, sorry. And that's going to be the next crisis that I think the streaming industry is going to eventually hit.
Oh, you hit it on the nail on the head. I was going to ask that. Do you see this as being a harbinger for the streamers, right? That it's a potential more rapid decay of their dominance, given this new trajectory we're seeing with younger consumers not necessarily wanting to pay for content?
Yeah, and I think it's so strange because nobody at the network level seems to be playing the long game. Nobody seems to be investing in the future. Everybody seems to be doing this smash and grab job. Like, it feels like David Zaslav is just robbing everything of Warner Brothers, in a clearance fire sale. And then he's out with this 60 million annual paycheck. And I'm sure he's going to get a golden parachute too. And so it's almost like there's a rating happening. And I think many people who are in other executive positions at these networks or studios are just like, hey, man, I'm just pushing over the abacus, counting how many days I have left until I get my pink slip. So the future really isn't being looked at by the streaming industry. I think you see some innovation from Netflix where they're saying like, oh, we're going to start bringing on podcasts, or Netflix is also saying that
Gaming?
we're going to, they have gaming, and we're going to they actually had introduced a sort of TikTok streaming reel. But again, why would I pay money for that when it is free on YouTube and other places? And I think you're going to see in the future, this is going to be the growth of brands. Brands are still the ones with the money, and it's the golden rule. Whoever has the gold makes the rules. And I think you're actually going to see more fragmentation. And now with like Chick-fil-A, for example, where Chick-fil-A has its own streaming network, it launches, and you can go on its QR code at its store and start playing games and watching content. I think every brand is going to say, well, we have our own media studio. I'm Pepsi. I'm Jif Peanut Butter. I'm, whatever. I'm Tide, and I got to sell detergent. And if nobody's going to watch commercials, maybe there's a way I can organically infuse our brand into a type of programming that reaches the viewer. And we have the money to do it. And I think Apple sort of sets the example for this, where Apple has the best programming on TV, but they're also losing $1 billion a year doing it. But Severance is sort of the one, I guess, show that kind of stands out, where it's like, this is an original show, an original story idea. This has an amazing cinematography. You could tell that they put a lot of effort into the production process of this. And at the same time, it's also a slow burn. I don't know what's happening in the first 2 or 3 episodes, as opposed to this, I'm supposed to slap you in the first 3 seconds, shake you and say, you're watching a horror thriller, and here's the entire plot. You know it in 5 minutes. And now we're just going to try to surprise you for the rest of the 90 minutes that you're watching the series.
Yeah, I see that for brands. Definitely. Like the first one that came to mind when you're talking about this is Duolingo. Like the Duolingo bird is basically its own content ecosystem right now. They do music videos, they do ice capades, like it's a full range of really engaging content that's specifically tied to this brand that is organic, and they've produced this stuff. They've made it really compelling, and people are fans of the bird, not even necessarily the app itself, right? And that's a pretty powerful thing. And you wonder where they can take it next. If they start partnering more with the studios that are on the rise, like these independent kind of studios who are becoming a thing because they were built by an influencer who now has an entire YouTube empire built around it. Like these kind of partnerships are going to really potentially define and very much compete with the large streamers that you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
So I think that's a great place to transition and talk a little bit more about how you became Producer Patrick, because in this shifting landscape, there's a lot of just flow and transition, and you have a pretty interesting origin story. So can we dive into that a little bit?
Sure. I think Producer Patrick really kind of came about as just being one of the thousands of entertainment employees that all of a sudden found themselves in a rut. And the thing about unscripted television, and having been in it for such a long time, is I was actually around for the 07-08 writer strike. That was back then. I was actually an associate producer, field producer. I was really getting my career going. And I remember that distinctively, the WGA shutting down production. But at the same time, unscripted then had its boom period. That's when the Real Housewives showed up. That's when the Kardashians had their moment. That was when the Jersey Shore took off. That is when literally reality television had its heyday. And so when this time came around, when May 2023 came around and we heard the writers were striking again, it was silent on the unscripted front. And that was really sort of the canary in the coal mine, because all of a sudden my community started talking to be like, shouldn't they be like ramping up by now? But nothing was happening. then the actors strike came. And then it became a lot of like, well, are they just waiting to see what happens if negotiations still come through? And then still like nothing was happening. And for the last 5 years, we've seen sort of the industry starting to slow down in ways where your hiatus periods between shows started to grow a little bit. It wasn't like there was a point where I would finish a show on a Friday and start a new show on a Monday. And then all of a sudden that became 2 or 3 weeks in between gigs. And that became a month in between gigs. And then that became 2 or 3 months between gigs, which was still sustainable. But all of a sudden the gaps were getting longer. All of a sudden I found myself a year without a project. And I knew something was up because I started calling my colleagues who were fellow executive producers and asking, hey, what's going on? And finally, people were just sort of hitting this breaking point where the facade was dropping. It was no longer like, yeah, I got a few projects we're working on because nobody really wants to reveal what's really happening. If I'm being Patrick, I'll be honest with you. I'm Ubering right now. I'm doing DoorDash deliveries, or I'm selling off heirlooms in order to make my mortgage. And then you started realizing that all the people that you knew were also in a crisis. And I think I kind of got myself in a headspace of I just didn't see my career coming back at that point, or I had to see myself pivoting. And the one thing about the entertainment industry is you don't talk about Fight Club. You know, if you talk about Fight Club, you'll end up like Trumbo, and you'll be ostracized and blacklisted from the community. You'll never enter the gates of Tinseltown ever again. You're done. And that's always been a fear. And I think any industry worker is just like, I just don't want to get kicked out because I love this industry so much. And so I just kind of went to online, and I think I was going to go for a hike, and all of a sudden it just started downpouring and I couldn't do it. And I was just so frustrated, and I was just so at my wit's end that I just kind of busted out my phone, and I just was like, hey, here's everything that's going on. Here's it. And I think it just flowed out of me, flew from the heart of like, this is what I'm going through. This is what the industry has done. And that's where we're at. And I thought it was a mic drop, and I was going to walk on my way and go sell insurance somewhere. And then all of a sudden, what you always thought was the bad stuff that was going to happen to you, the exact opposite happened. And it was a tsunami of support from the industry where everybody was just like, somebody just said the elephant in the room. Somebody just said the quiet part out loud. And I actually got this massive support, and I still get thank you letters and thank you messages daily from people saying, hey, thanks for being my guide to get me through this industry. Because we internalize these things so much of when this happens to us that we start thinking like, is it me? Is it my performance? Is it something I do? Do I have a bad reputation around town? And that's what everybody was thinking. Nobody in the entertainment industry was acting as a community. And for once, now it doesn't matter if you're unscripted, if you're in film, if you're in TV. We see this community really coming together, indie and studio, where they're just saying, hey, we all love the same stuff. We all have the same passion. We've been at each other's throats competitively for so long, but we really are a community that should be supporting each other. So, you know, I guess that's sort of the silver lining that I've seen in all of this.
It's an amazing silver lining, and I think it actually translates beyond the entertainment industry as an inspiration point, because if you look at writers, you look at marketers, you know, the advent of AI and it's taking over jobs. You know, I spoke with a writer the other day who says they're having a hard time paying medical bills, you know, and another who had to take a gig writing AI prompts for like $20 an hour, you know, as opposed to, you know, what he should get paid for the typical stuff he'd do. It's
right.
Tough out there in the content space in general right now, and the creative space. Like, things are changing rapidly.
Yes.
Rapidly.
Right. And then you throw AI on the scene, and that's also another stick of dynamite in the equation where everybody just doesn't seem to understand where it's going. Google just announced that it's now partnering to help make actually full-length AI features, AI generated features. They recently came out showing that they now can sync picture and sound. So now when you generate an image, you can generate somebody talking with their own voice, and it actually is scary looking real. And if it's scary looking real now, I can only imagine where it's going to be a year from now, because 2 years ago, everybody had 7 fingers and like jiggling lips. But you look at AI now and you go, wow, that's getting pretty close to reality. So you can only imagine what another year from now, what AI is going to be able and capable of doing.
I was playing with it today.
Today, right?
Well, I was playing with Google Flow today because I had a subscription for Pro, and it's good, and it's not even the top level. I mean, there's some bugs I got to work out and stuff, but like it's scary good. Just from
it's scary good
basic user perspective, it really is.
Yes, it is. But you question the other flip side of all of this is there going to be a rejection of this from the audience? You know, the basically all of this doesn't matter unless the audience is willing to accept it.
Yep.
And we're actually seeing on the flip side, from a more grassroots level, is people are just getting tired of social media, and people are getting tired of inauthenticity. So especially when you go online and you go on social media, you're seeing these projections of people that is their best version of themselves. You know, the happy family, the best vacations, the best poses, not the fat under, you know, it's the most perfect picture if it was face-tuned. Some people even go to that extent.
My LinkedIn feed, oh my gosh.
I know you face-tune, Chris, but you know, I know your filter's on right now. You look great, but with all of that happening, we're actually seeing this movement where people are either, one, giving up their phones entirely. They're saying, I just need a mental health break. I just can't have this phone. It's just like a cigarette. It's ruining me. I'm not feeling well because of this. It's making me feel sick. And at the same time, you have the younger generation, which is just saying, like, I want to experience life. I've had a screen in front of me since the day I was born. And we're seeing an uptick on things like YouTube where it's like old ladies gardening, and it's like Beth, and she's like, I'm planting hydrangeas today, and she's getting millions of views because people are just like, this is natural, this is authentic. And I see it with my own material. I think part of my success is just not bullshitting. And so now you take this idea that the people that you're watching and every image that you're seeing on the screen is artificial. How are you going to write? I want to see a real person, or do I want to see a generated person? It's kind of like when I'm on the phone, you know, talking to customer service, how many times am I screaming representative? I don't want to talk to the robot. You know, I just don't. I just reject it. I know it's talking to me. It can help me facilitate what I need, but I want to talk to a real person. And there's something about that I think really kind of breaks down to our innate sense of humanity and being human. And what does that mean? And these are the questions that are coming up as we're having this sort of technological turnover.
I was just going to say that, like, our kids, my daughter, she can spot AI a mile away. You know, we're watching things like, that's AI, and just discounts it, like puts it aside, has no interest whatsoever, you know, and then she's popping onto her tablet with Procreate and doing animations like by hand and stuff. And it's really fascinating to watch, like, the use and how they're going to transition into this or reject it completely, because they're the ones who are now growing up with AI and seeing it and comparing it to what's real and what's not real. Right. So like, what does that look like? Are they going to completely reject it or what?
And we're talking about generative AI. In terms of ChatGPT, right now, it's like the number 5 website in the world. Everybody's using ChatGPT. In fact, all the professors at universities are just like, every single student is using ChatGPT to write their essays. So where AI is being successful is, you know, you could say that your daughter doesn't want to do the generative AI stuff, and I can understand that. That's fun. That's artistic. Why would we want to do that? But if it's got to write, if it's going to do my homework, do my, do my homework. You know, if it's going to do my taxes, yes, I'm absolutely. So if I think when AI is utilized to do the things we don't want to do, that then everybody's like, it's a great useful tool and I love it, and I don't need to pay my lawyer to look over this legal brief. I don't, you know, so that's where we're sort of seeing like AI really is going to make some inroads. But when it comes to like, I just want to paint and make art or make music or do the things that I would normally do in my leisure time, but now AI is there. That's what's upsetting people, because AI is supposed to alleviate the stress of the work. You know, the robot's supposed to clean my house, and do the dishes and everything, while I frolic in the field, and I play on a cello, and I paint a beautiful landscape. But now AI is doing that too. So, and that's where the annoying thing is coming in. I think that's the annoying point of it.
It's interesting. I'm seeing two cultural streams kind of happen right now. You mentioned your daughter, Chris, and I look at my son, and he's totally fine with AI, but he's relegated AI, especially generative AI, to a purpose. It's a disposable thing he doesn't care about. It doesn't need to be great. It's entertaining. It's funny. It's like a meme somewhere. But for the things that he loves, it's not AI.
Yes.
Right? Or if, hey, Dad, do you know that thing? No, I don't. Instead of ask Alexa or look it up on Google, let's just ask ChatGPT, because now you can talk to it. And so we'll ask and it'll talk back. And it's fun and it's entertaining. But in terms of it becoming the creative engine, not about it at all. But then you have like Netflix, which is using it to everywhere, right?
Yeah.
But in some places, I think they're doing it wisely and subtly, where they're using it to improve something. Well, we don't have the ability to do this one thing for an effect. Can we use that as the in-between to enhance that? Yeah, let's do it. But I think what we're going to start to see is that AI might become a big creator.
Yeah.
But it's going to be the sort of like disposable version of what we're doing. And then people who are sticking to more traditional filmmaking techniques are artisanal filmmakers, so to speak, right? Where now it's the organic, the version where you're like, oh, there's prestige behind this thing, right? This is the thing that I'll watch when I have nothing else. This is the thing when I really want to engage or like have some prestige.
Yes, absolutely. And the other question is, how do you monetize AI? If we all know AI is cheap and free right now, if they charge me $10 to go see an AI movie, I ain't paying that. Because it's just, why am I paying something that was free to generate in the first place? Or I don't want to give my money away to them. Like, we all know how easy and accessible it is to create an image on ChatGPT or to create something on Sora. So the idea of a producer, is that producer really a storyteller now? Because everybody's like, I'm an AI filmmaker. And it's like, no, dude, please don't call yourself an AI filmmaker. One, you don't shoot on film. So that really annoys me. Anybody with the film school is like, unless it's shot on film, you don't call it a film. It's a movie. And then secondly, all you do are you're just typing in prompts. What skill do you have outside of that? Are you a good storyteller? Because I do see this is where storytellers are going to have an advantage, because you can make the most beautiful images ever. And I've seen directors of photography make these amazing aerial shots, make this moodiness. But unless you have the power to captivate your audience and bring them in, that's the skill set. And that's something you can't teach to anybody. And I see AI still having a hard time with that. And I see people making these generative AI movies, and I've tried to watch them, objectively and just be like, okay, let me just watch it. And I still have a hard time watching it because it's just not immersive, and I don't care. And unless you have heart and care, that's what attracts an audience in. And one of the other things about AI that I want to say is, from working in unscripted, AI still can't predict what an audience wants. We still have AI now, but we still have Mad Max Furiosa and Joker 2. No, there was no AI that says, I don't think the musical thing, dude, is going to work with your audience. Like if you were to lay out every single unscripted show from the year 2000 to 2025, and you ask AI, pick the hits, it still couldn't pick the hits for you. They couldn't say, oh, the one about the guys making duck calls in Louisiana, that's going to be a hit show. Or the one about the Guidos on the Jersey Shore, that one's going to be a hit show. You can't predict what the audience wants. The audience knows what they want when they see it. And that, I think, has been sort of this amazing explosion that's happened in our industry, where there's so much saturation of media. But really, if you're trying to find the stuff that's really bringing in audiences, it's still a very limited amount. Like you go on Instagram where I've seen a lot of success, and I'm meeting a lot of people that are trying to reach out to me, and I see, wow, they have a massive following too. They have triple, 4 or 5 times the following. But then you start like doing a little research and you're like, well, if you have 500,000 followers, why does your photo only have 10 likes? And you start saying like, oh, wait a second, this is a lot of people not putting in the work. People would rather buy their followers and try to convince somebody that they're popular than actually putting in the time, the effort to make content that is going to connect with people. And I think that, again, where it goes to what I was saying about, I think the storytellers are really going to be the ones that have the power, the people that want to tell a story, that know how to tell a story and know how to dedicate time to that craft of doing it to make it good. And again, it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be quality. But if you know how to engage an audience, and you know how to keep them, and you know how to sustain that, then you are going to have success sort of in the online world.
And it's like there's a big thing going around right now around authenticity and being human, right? And being able to show that you're human through whatever it is that you're creating. AI couldn't write a film script for the life of it, right? Like
it's getting better. It's getting better. But you know what? The way I had AI, I did write a screenplay with AI assisting it. And the best way I can explain it is it takes the painful part of writing away. Meaning like, you're like, how do I start this scene? And then the best way I could explain it is it shovels all the sand in your sandbox. And then you can start building the sandcastle. So that's the best way I could explain how AI can help for screenwriting. It's good to bounce ideas off of. It's a great assistant writer, but still you have to be in command of that creativity. And you just can't hand over the keys and say, write me a script and make it the best script in the world.
Yep. And that crosses over, man. You can't start from a non-human point and expect it to fill in that humanity for you. Using an AI tool to humanize something without first going through putting real experiences in and having that kind of personal context and voice and tone, like you're not going to get the output.
Right. And you're only going to get an output that's been done before. Right. You're not going to get anything, especially as a creative. What makes writers so good is they think of things that you never would have imagined, or it's like horror films. It's like, how can you creatively kill somebody in a way that hasn't been seen before? But that's that's the challenge to writers, and of course you give it to ChatGPT and it'll be like, yeah, stab somebody, but it's like in a writer's room, you're like, you kill somebody with a lamb shank and then you feed it to the cops, and that was a Alfred Hitchcock Presents. But still, like, that's the cool stuff that you could do with creativity, and the power of a writer's room, I still think, can blow ChatGPT away with storytelling.
Agreed. It's interesting because I think what we're starting to see now is, I'm a huge proponent of AI. I won't deny it, but it's been really helpful in terms of, I'm writing something and I'm like, ooh, how can I make this stronger? I'm missing something. And it becomes like my brainstorming partner. But when I think back to the things that have been most creative and actually turned out well, I used to be a photographer. And so if I'm doing an image, I'm literally feeding it. I need my camera to have this focal length. I need it to have this ISO. Yes. And so then what I get is what I would have got for my camera, but I'm saying use this lens. And so it's very specific. And it's that marriage of expertise with now speed and convenience that really work together. And to your point, you have to have that storytelling expertise. But then I think there's also the technical expertise that has to be labeled or layered on top of it to really make it function.
For sure.
As a result of that, though, it's really interesting. I think we're starting to see how that's infiltrating real world in terms of Netflix trying to use AI, or even more influencers or creators starting their own studios, because, well, now some of this stuff with the writers room, they can have 2 writers. Those writers are working really hard, but then they can have that first few rounds of review just with AI to knock out the things that are really,
to punch it up. But the flip side is that not to become reliant on it. The caveat to that is the laziness. All of a sudden I turn my brain off and AI will do it. you still have to find a way to keep yourself engaged. I've used AI to source news stories, and then I've seen it come up with things that were not real. And unfortunately, I double checked my work, and I started off in news. Most people don't know this about my career. I started off at CBS News. I worked at Court TV. I was Nancy Grace's production assistant. I got stories there too. But at least having worked in a newsroom and understanding of double checking your sources, making sure you have 3 accurate sources. If a line is being cited, I need to see where that exists.
Yep.
And to see that this device can still cheat. It would rather please you than cheat you, or it would rather please you and cheat you, and instead of actually, failing you. So that's what I've noticed about ChatGPT, which can become very, very dangerous. It's almost like, almost like a 5-year-old, where it's like trying to hide something from you.
Your boomer parents getting a political newsletter that they don't check the sources on, right? Like,
yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's becoming the Facebook of the next generation. It's just,
it totally is.
It's just bad memes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. By the way, have you seen there's a pizza parlor in Alexandria, Virginia, and guess what? They're hoarding kids in the basement. Like,
that's not one of those. Yeah. So one of the things that we've been looking at is really not just the AI world, but how does that have more wide-reaching implications in terms of ethics and creativity? One of the questions we had asked is it ethical to buy used books and music? Right? Mm-hmm. It's because then the original creator's not being credited and paid for those.
Although, yeah, I saw that article, and it's kind of like, oh man, like that's a bridge too far for me, because it's like, okay, so if I picked up Charles Dickens' book, an old Charles Dickens book, or I mean, what was Amoeba Music then? Right. If I used to go to Amoeba all the time to buy used CDs or used television shows, or I was like, oh my gosh, I've been looking for this DVD forever. So all of a sudden to say, well, it's not going to, that just means that this is becoming less about the art, less about the literature, and more about it being a commodity and monetized. And we're losing the humanity again about what the arts are supposed to do. It's supposed to provoke thought. It's not, the artist shouldn't be like, well, how am I getting my paycheck? Like, how about all the books throughout time? Like, all of a sudden, is Plato going to start asking for residuals, or somebody's like, I'm 1/1000th of Plato's ancestor, and I should be getting, residuals on his on his ideas of democracy.
Think about the profits for the Bible. How much should God be making for that?
It's called the Catholic Church. He's got his money, man. Don't worry about that.
It's a very interesting question where it just, where's, if you take it to the extreme logical conclusion, right? It's never ending.
Right. But look, I think the problem is, why are we asking questions like this? Has our economy gotten to a point where everybody is so desperate for making money now because the younger generations have just been squeezed and squeezed and squeezed, and everybody's become a worker bee and everybody's living paycheck to paycheck? I just saw something where it's like 60% of the United States can barely afford basic needs. So basically, to say, that I think we have to look at the underlying issue here about our own economy and where we've been stretched thin, and the idea that we should be paying $20 a month for services, where I remember cable used to be like $60 a month. And where have we, I feel like there's more of a fleecing of the consumer now than there's ever been. And I think that's really also going to hit a breaking point as well.
So I think with that, we have about a minute left. I want to make sure that you're able to share your socials, where people can find you if they want to follow Producer Patrick.
Sure.
Any last thoughts you have?
Oh, sure. No, everybody can follow me on Producer Patrick on Instagram, or Producer Patrick on TikTok. Maybe you might find me on YouTube. I'm just getting that going, but as well as Patrick Caligiuri on LinkedIn as well.
Awesome. Patrick, thank you again for joining. This was a fantastic conversation, really insightful stuff. love hearing your take on being a creator and jumping into the space that you've been into. It's an amazing story, and I think it's inspirational for a lot of folks out there who have been through a similar hard time to see that, yeah, you can turn it around as well. So thanks for that, and thanks for joining us.
Thank
I
you,
appreciate
Patrick.
it. Thank you, Chris and Damion. Really enjoyed being on with you guys.